Astraea is a single target arts ruler that does damage. A lot of damage. She has a strong mix of steroids that help her do solid crit damage and NP damage. On top of this, she deals even more damage to evil enemies, of which there are many. Not very many mobs are evil, but there are loads of evil servants. To make matters even better, she easily loops. Her first skill is a targetable attack, defense, and NP gain buff for 3 turns. This skill can help her keep looping and staying alive. It can also be used to help a squishier support in a pinch. Her second skill is a 1-turn mana burst that also functions as a substantial star bomb. Most star bombs only scale up to 20 stars at max, whereas hers reaches a sturdy 30. Star bombs are very useful for arts-based servants as they normally do not produce sufficient stars to enable their own crits. This is a very interesting skill. It increases her crit damage and absorption for 1 turn, and also increases her NP gauge by 20%. It does all of these for the mere cost of 5 crit stars. Normally, skills that require stars like this are very annoying, but since she has 30 stars available on a second skill's usage, this isn't as much of an issue. This could be an issue in team play, since it still is a reduction in stars, but they are nice enough to add a star absorb to compensate for the loss. The battery can help get the first NP off very easily. Speaking of her NP, her Noble Phantasm is a single target arts NP that deals bonus damage to evil enemies. As a bonus, her NP drops 20 stars on use. The damage bonus is quite nice. The 50% damage bonus effectively turns her damage into berserker damage, since berserkers also do 50% damage against almost anyone. You might be wondering which skill is worth leveling first. GamePress says that you should level her third skill, then her first, and then lastly her second. I can understand why they would say this, but I disagree with that judgment. I believe that her second skill should be prioritized, then her first, then her third. Here's my reasoning. She will use her NP very often. Her arts buff might have the same damage scaling as her first skill, but this is an arts buff. It is going to offer a nice boost in NP gain up. Now you might say,
the first skill has an NP gain up too, silly.
And you would be right. However, it isn't attached to a massive star bomb. The damage might not scale well, but the stars scale from 10 to 30. Remember how her third skill has a star demerit? It is a crit buff, so it depends on you having stars in the first place. Here's another thing. At 6, her third skill has a 5-turn cooldown. This means that it will sync up with her other skills at 10. Sure, that extra turn might be beneficial, but you might not have enough stars on that turn to pop the battery and still crit reliable anyways. So you'll usually use them both at the same time. They're all good skills, but I believe that her third skill depends the least on a cooldown reduction. Servants that have arts NPs and are capable of consistently generating stars are usually very good. Lancer Melt, Saber Lancelot, and Saber Tomoe are all good examples of this. They can either generate crit stars on their NP, or generate them passively by using skills. These servants also have star absorption skills that help them with the arts crits that are vital for looping. There are exceptions to this. Caster Gilgamesh has issues looping due to scuffed NP gain. Berserker Vlad generates stars on his NP as well, but his NP gain is so poor that he requires a lot of help to loop. Astraea does not have these issues. She not only has decent NP gain and hit counts, she also has 2 skills that increase the NP that she gets from her arts cards, as well as a battery that can close any gaps that result from any missed arts crits. The situations you'll use her are not particularly rare. Her NP performs comparably to those of Berserkers when the enemy is evil. Berserkers have a near universal 50% damage bonus, while Astraea deals at least 50% extra damage on NP usage versus evil enemies. So you might think,
why should I use her when my Pinth also NPs easily, but also deals good normal card damage?
This is a fair point. Astraea is pretty much never doing more than neutral damage. However, she has a few things to make up for that. First off, she has some strong critical capacity because she generates stars very easily and has solid multiplicative buffs. This is still dependent on her ability to crit though. Second off, she doesn't die as quickly. Berserkers may do universally increased damage, but they take even more damage to balance that. Rulers are the opposite because they deal universally neutral damage and take half damage from almost everyone. Plenty of 4-star berserkers have some form of survival, but aside from Hercules, their longevity is far from assured. However, Luvia not only takes a quarter of the damage they do normally, but she also has an additional 20% defense buff that can reduce her damage taken even further 3 turns out of 5. Luvia works better in long fights than berserkers, especially when they're evil enemies. Alright, numbers time. I'm going to compare her NP damage to those of her berserker peers. I have my reasoning for each comparison. Astraea, since she has an easily accessible NP, Beowulf since he has strong burst capabilities with crits and NP damage, Hercules because he has obscenely high levels of staying power, and Atalanta Alter because she has a comparable mixture of the previously mentioned berserkers' strengths. These numbers will assume that the berserkers are receiving their 1.5x multiplier, and Luvia will be dealing neutral damage. All skills are assumed to be at rank 10, and all NP levels are counted at NP1. Astraea nets a modest 61,000 damage on average. I am not accounting for her damage versus Greek mythological males. It is worth noting that all of her steroids last for 3 turns. Her damage will not fall off after a single turn like some of her competition. Beowulf is a beast. He deals over 70,000 damage on average with his Berserk skill active. This may be reliant on a 1-turn steroid, but this steroid combos with another 1-turn buff that boosts his critical capacity significantly. His burst turns are exceptional, even if he is dependent on skills that are only available 1 out of 5 turns. Clearly, Herc's selling point isn't in his damage capabilities. At NP1, he hits for a mere 56,000 on average. His selling point is being able to live long enough to outdamage his competition. Pinth might do more damage with her NP, but Herc can offer a lot more value since he can live long enough to do more damage with or without his NP. Lastly, we have Atalanta Alter. She has solid NP gain, she can set up good crit turns, and has hard survival. She's not as strong as any of the previous servants in their respective roles, but she can offer a good mixture of their abilities. She hits just below Pinth with an average of 59,000. Now we have Astraea. At NP1, she hits for 41,000 damage against non-evil enemies. When the enemy is evil and she has 100% overcharge, she hits a nice 61,000. That is 400 damage higher than Astraea's average. Note that this does not include the damage increase that she gets from her NP upgrade. After she gets her upgrade next year, her damage skyrockets. At NP1s, it hits 54,000 on average. This is just below Herc's damage with his 1.5x modifier. When an upgraded Noble Phantasm lands on an evil target, true destruction begins. Her average hits a whopping 82,000. That beats out Beowulf's NP damage by 12,000. I think that I've covered a few whys, but how about the hows? First, here's the command code setup you should aim for. Usually the most important card that you have to think of when building command codes is the arts card. It is cut very clear as to which command codes help boost her performance the most. Since her arts cards give a lot of NP gain and she easily generates her own stars, you will want to focus on the star absorption command codes. I prefer to use the Okuda Alter command code, since it offers crit damage along with the absorption. After that, just focus on crit codes with her buster cards. They aren't as important because ideally she will be using her arts cards the most. She will rarely use her quick cards, so you can be flexible with it. You can put a Star Bomb code on it just for the Star Gen turn if necessary. It's also worth noting that since she is taking half damage from everything, she effectively doubles the value out of a heal. That is why I put a heal code on her quick. As for building teams around her, I could just list the usual art supports and leave it at that. Luvia is strong enough that she will more than carry her own weight in normal quests. She's fairly versatile, but her weaknesses can hurt her a lot, so I will specify which budget supports effectively mitigate those weaknesses. She's very susceptible to debuffs. She has a decent 22.5% chance of resisting debuffs via Core of the Goddess, and that is it. This is why one of my most recommended supports for her is Asclepius. He clears debuffs, he gives debuff immunity, and he gives debuff resistance. He also helps her deal with the non-NP damage that slowly chips her health away. His guts can also help if you're using her against single target enemies. Her tankiness helps her with the AoE enemies, but single target enemies can pose an issue with their concentrated damage. He offers a 30% NP gain buff that can help compensate for when she whiffs those vital crits. Additionally, he has a 20% battery that can help in similar situations. His issue lies in his lack of offensive support. Aside from being able to help her use her NP more often, he offers nothing to her damage potential. Sure, she may be self-sufficient when it comes to dishing out high damage, but sometimes she needs help breaking that one huge break bar. This is where other supports shine. Hans is very nice for her because he helps her generate more stars, solidify her crit damage, and a load of other good things. Of the 3 multiplicative crit buffs she has in her kit, the lowest value is the attack buff. She has a 40% total arts buff, a 60% crit buff, and a 20% attack buff. The attack buff is the only one that lasts more than 1 turn, but she has passive crit and arts buffs. That is another thing that Hans helps with. Her crit buff lasts only 1 turn, with 3 turns of downtime. Hans's crit buff conveniently lasts for 3 turns. He can also keep her at a stable HP level with his combination of defensive buffs and healing buffs. However, he is an anti-chip damage support. He does very well with dealing with small damage over time, but when it comes to time for an enemy NP, he has nothing aside of RNG defense buffs. Asclepius may not have damage steroids, but he does have guts. Speaking of dealing with incoming NPs, we have David. David is always useful. He has an attack buff, which benefits every form of damage. He has a nice self-defense buff with a heal to increase his longevity. He even has a little bit of burst damage with his NP. His 3 arts cards can be helpful when it comes to building NP charge. Lastly, but not leastly, he has Harp of Healing. This is a team evade that lasts as long as a servant is not hit. It is incredibly useful for servants who are lacking in hard survival. Astraea is lacking in hard survival. His issue is that he does not offer the stabilization that the other 2 powerhouses do. David has 1 evade for the entire team every 6 turns. When his evade is pinged off, he offers no defensive support. I don't say this to devalue his evade. Harp is an insanely good skill. Once. The one time it gives value, it gives a lot of value. His attack buff may be nice, but the only thing it does is increase damage. Again, not a bad thing, but card buffs are more useful if you're trying to NP more often. This is where this guy shines. Mozart offers a very large arts buff. He also guarantees crits for 1 turn. His issue is that this may only be 1 turn of value. The amount of value is huge. He gives her a 50% card buff that applies to her NP. The issue is that she has multiple means by which she can generate stars. This means that it may be difficult to get value out of his star bomb. It can compensate for turns where she does not have a stars from her second skill or her NP, but he might not even live long enough to use it. Her second skill is 60% of everything he does on a 5-turn cooldown. Regardless, his arts buff is a huge bonus to her damage. He offers a lot in short-term value, whereas the previous ones have a lot in long-term value. Paracelsus can help make her looping a little more consistent, but he offers little in damage. His thing is helping servants get a lot more out of their arts cards, but Luvia already has very strong arts cards. Since his skill have long cooldowns, his long-term value is quite lacking. His attack debuff can be nice, but it does not offer enough value to be worth the investment. Boudica offers a ton in terms of damage. 50% crit, 20% arts, and 20% attack on NP. All 3 of these last for 3 turns. On top of that, she helps defense buff stacking. And now she can grant guts for anyone 5 turns out of 6. However, her status as a rider means that she is very likely to steal stars. Regardless, she gives a large amount of multiplicative buffs that support Luvia's arts crits. Overall, I would say that Hans is the best low rarity support for her. He's able to help her crit harder while also giving her a variety of supportive buffs that boost her overall performance. Sometimes a fight will involve a lot of offensive debuffs. This can be very annoying to handle. That's when Asclepius is far more applicable. David will be useful unless you're killing enemies before they can hit with strong burst damage. Even then, he can help kill them since he has damaging NP, and also offers a little support on the side. Usage of Mozart, Paracelsus, and Boudica will depend on if you're trying to dish out high damage sooner or deal with higher chip longer. Astraea is a very strong servant that is very versatile. When it comes to raw damage, she shines brightly. She has a few weaknesses, but they are easily covered. I will give her a 9.5 out of 10. She's very good in many scenarios, but she isn't completely self-sufficient. She only needs a tiny bit of help to improve her performance in select circumstances. Even then, it isn't egregious enough to warrant a full point reduction. If you like this video, subscribe. If you don't agree with something that I have said, then that's fine. Leave a comment. I'd be glad to discuss this with you. Thanks for watching.